thanks for stopping by. I've noticed since my video back when I was doing these, I found these on the side of a job site. They were laying in the weeds and I wasn't sure what they were. A couple of videos ago, I had myself beating myself up with them and stuff, you know. It takes some practice, I'm sure, to learn how to do this. Over there. I wasn't very good. I didn't know what I was doing, but turns out I went down to the library. Yeah, they still have those. And I got a book. They still have those. And I practiced a little bit. And this thing too, I was like having a hard time. It's really hard to hit this and keep it going straight. I guess what you're supposed to do is hit it, let it bounce back, and then hit it again, you know, like 1, 2, 1, 2. And you just practice and you start getting better. But totally honest with you, I never can hit this hard enough to do it like the guys, like the professionals do. I don't know if it's the bag, if it's the, this is cheap, but if it's, it's supposed to go like that, and you see those guys really rolling it, you know, but I know that I never hit it hard enough. And that's about all I can do, seriously. But then I found out that if you get in here and do it, like this. I'm getting old. This helps with my arthritis, rheumatism, and rigor mortis. It's a good shoulder and joint workout. A little bit of cardio for an old guy like me. But these things, man, I really brought it to myself trying to learn how to do them. You're supposed to, like, you hold them up high. You don't hold them down here. You don't get enough, I don't know, you don't get enough torque. If you go up here, hold them here, and you kind of go like that. And then practice twirl, and then do this. Do that. Well, that's horrible. I'll keep practicing. You never know. So if you've watched many of my, or any of my videos, you probably remember this tragedy, which has been a thorn in my side for over a year. It had, you know, the whirligig, the flywheel or flex plate, whatever you want to call it, was broke bad. There's a video. Maybe I'll show you something here, a clip. Here's a clip. I promise you, that's the noise we've been hearing. So anyhow, the flex plate, flywheel slash whatever thingy-majabber doohickey, what's it? It was bad. It was broke. It was rattling. You couldn't tell. Well, I couldn't tell from listening to it if it was a rod knock or if it was a flex plate. I was mostly certain it was a flex plate. I was right. I fixed it. I drove this car about 40 miles after I fixed it. It ran perfect. Had power, ran good, didn't stall, didn't sputter, didn't spit, didn't miss. Put new tires on it. And then I was coming back into town, and as the engine started to rev up in first gear, before it shifts, and then it goes, the RPMs go back down, starts going up in second gear before it shifts. Just before it would shift in every gear, you would hear this brrr, brrr. That's a telltale sign of a rod knock. Rod knocks suck. That's an engine destroyer. That's all there is to it. Look at that. there. That's cool. Man, I miss the old albums. I miss all the old real music. Anyhow, back to this. So we're gonna take a look at it. I'm really pretty sure that there's a rod knock in this thing now, and I'll explain to you what that is. But let's take a look and see. I'm gonna show you on that what's going on in there. Forgive me for I didn't do the purple. That paint, I have nothing to do with that paint. This isn't my engine, but anyhow, this is just demonstration purposes only. So we're gonna see. I don't know, probably don't have any battery left in it. Yeah, it sneezed. Listen to that. So now let me put a charger on it. For all you people that are mechanics and know this stuff, forgive me. And if I'm wrong, type it into the comments and tell me what I'm saying wrong. I know I don't have the terminology down, but I've been doing this for a long, long time. So anyhow, this is for people who may want to learn a little bit or may want to know some stuff. So this is just some quick basics on what I think is going on with this engine over here. This is a block. It's a Chevy 350, 70s-ish, late 70s. Anyhow, from whatever year to 1985, they were pretty much all exactly the same. Chevy 350 block. The 350, this is a V8. And it's a V8 because if you look at the way the openings are, it makes a V. Get it? That's a V. It's an 8 because it has 8 cylinders. There's 4 on that side, 4 on that side. This block is decent. It's going to the machine shop and getting taken care of eventually and coming back like new. The rest of it's all pretty much garbage. We tore it down not long ago. Now this is called a bear block. So the only thing that's left in there's some cam bearings and freeze plugs and stuff like that. But for what I'm talking about with this is a V6. Same thing. The only difference is 2. That has 8. This has 6. 4 or 3 here, 3 there. This has 4 and 4 on the other side. Let me get my sick ass pointer. Boom. In the cylinders, each one has a piston and a rod. This is a piston. This is a rod. They are connected by a wrist pin. That's that guy right there. I could show you with my sick ass pointer. Right there. That circle gets pressed in and holds these together. And like I said, don't get nervous. This is going to the shop and getting redone. Each one of these cylinders has a piston in it. And these pistons travel up and down by means of an explosion. Maybe not that kind of explosion, but a controlled explosion anyhow. So now I've spun the engine upside down so that we can look at what's happening underneath. This is the engine block. This is a crankshaft. The crankshaft sits in there. The rod connects to the crankshaft like that. Now we threw them all out. The end caps, the rod end caps that sit on this side of it and holds it tight. But it's basically one of these. This is for the main bearing. The main bearing is what holds the crank to the block. Basically this bolts on there and holds that rod to the crank. With a bearing like that in between it. Like that. So the rod gets connected to the crankshaft like that, with a bearing. Oh, there's a bearing in this one. Let's see if I can do it with one hand. And there it is. There's the bearing. This bearing sits on this crank with another one on the other side of it where the rod end cap bolts on top and holds it all together. Well, what happens if you look here, each one of these parts of the crank that has a rod connecting to it and where it connects to the block, oil is pumped through those. Oil journal. And oil comes flying out of this and gets in between this bearing. See, that guy's scarred up pretty good. It gets in between this bearing and the crank and lubricates it and keeps it spinning. What happens when your oil gets sludged up, thick, the engine has a lot of miles on it, it's been abused, these start to wear out. When the bearings wear out, this guy starts banging around in there like that. It starts doing some serious damage. Now, what can be done if it's just a rod bearing? So if it's a rod bearing banging in here on the crank, that's not as bad as what people might get confused with as a main bearing. The main bearing is in here. So it's not this whole thing, just this bearing in here. I'm not going to push it out with one hand, but that's the bearing, and then it sits inside this cap. This cap bolts in there like that. If you hear that noise that we heard over here, that thing's banging like Neil Peart hitting a rockin' solo. I'm going to shut it off. That is not good. I got her shut down because I don't want to let that run too long. It's just doing more damage and beating itself apart. Chances are that's a rod bearing or a rod knock. If you hear a deeper boom, 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 that's when these bearings wear out and you're almost guaranteed catastrophic engine failure is imminent, because that's when the crank is in here going, no good, bad. When the rod is in there bouncing around, that is sometimes repairable. Sometimes. I've done it. I know a lot of people will say it's not. It can be done from underneath without pulling the engine out. I'm going to take the oil pan off. The oil pan sits here and encases all of this. In most vehicles, you can't get to the oil pan because there's a bunch of car in the way. Remember, this is the bottom of the engine. In this vehicle in particular, I believe you can. I have to take some exhaust loose, and then I can drop the pan, probably move the engine a little bit. I had a pickup truck that had a rod knocking. If you catch it quick enough, where that thing starts to rattle, you can hear it. You'll hear brrr, brrr, every time it gets ready to shift into the next gear. That means this is spinning faster and faster. Once it spins at a certain RPM, that rod starts to flutter in there a little bit, because it's still, I mean, you're talking just a little bit of clearance in there. The oil has a cushion between the bearing and the crank. There's just a cushion of oil in there. This isn't even supposed to be touching that crank. It's floating. Well, when the oil's not getting there, or when this starts to get worn out, or when it gets a little bit of grit or junk in there, that's what you have an oil filter for. This is where the filter goes. If you get a little bit of deposit, junk, garbage in there, it starts to wear out. It'll scratch this, especially when these go really bad like that. This will tear this up in no time. We're going to take that oil pan off. We're going to look underneath there. We're going to see what it looks like, how bad the damage is, if it can be replaced. If it can, you can buy what's called an oversized bearing. This is a certain thickness. If I find that the crank is not damaged too bad, or damaged at all, which it probably has a little scarring on it, and if I find that the rod's still in good shape and it's not all scuffed up, which even if it is, that's not a spot where it's going to have friction on it, because it's going to be separated with a bearing. This is the business end. This is where all the friction and spinning and turning goes. This can be scarred, and I mean, not horribly, but it can be. It's not going to really be a big issue. I had an old pickup truck that had a bearing rattling in there. I dropped the oil pan, pushed the rod up out of the way, got what they call an oversized bearing. It's just a fuzz thicker than this, and it takes up the space from the worn out bearing. And if it's not too bad, I can actually probably get stock bearings and replace it. Just the one. All you have to do is take a couple bolts off of here, pull the cap off, push the piston out of the way, slide the bearing out, slide the bearing out of the cap, put the new bearing in, lube it up, cap it, torque it, put it back together, start it up, and then scrap the car, because it's probably not going to work. If this doesn't work, I'm going to look for a good charity to send this car off to, because I am done with it. I don't want it in my driveway anymore. And I'm not going to put any more money into it. I got it for a really good price. And it's the only thing it's been good for is making videos. Like I said, I drove about 40 miles before the bearings started rattling in there. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's have a look at what we're going to go through here. I had this whole engine out. That would have been a great time to pull the oil pan, and I stopped before I pulled the oil pan because I thought everything was good. So let's look underneath here. I'll show you what's going on. That is the transmission pan. This is the oil pan. This is the oil level sensor. This is the oil drain plug. I have to drain the oil into this bucket full of whatever. Up here you're going to notice some bolts. So I've got 1, 2, the bolts that are all covered in oil, yeah, those have to come out. There's many of them. And they go all the way around. I have to get this bolt out here because this bracket is a motor mount, and it's bolted here, and it's bolted here. I have to remove those bolts. I have to remove these bolts on the side, this one, and then there's another one on this. That one's going to be a bear, because this, if you look straight up and down, it's more like that. So I have to get a wrench up in there and turn it and go sideways. That one's going to be a bear. Anyways, drain the oil, start pulling bolts, and we'll go from there. So while I was draining the oil, I took the opportunity to gather some of the old oil to catch it and just get a look at it, because it looked awful dark coming out. That oil's, it should look like this, because it's literally got maybe 45, 50 miles on it. That engine did not run very long with the oil change. Now, I didn't flush the engine. It's got 250,000 miles or more, but it shouldn't look like this, I don't think. It should look a lot more like this. 50 miles, 60 miles is what I drove on it. And this is what we're dealing with. So I got a magnet, and I'm going to just kind of drag that through there and see if there's anything sitting down in there. I caught this oil in stream as it was draining out of the oil pan. but it sure does not. I mean, that doesn't look bad on a silver background, you know. I don't really see any metal in it. That's a good thing. If this engine was doing an unscheduled rapid disassembly on its own, there would be, the oil would get kind of silverish. This oil is black. I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to keep working on it and take it apart. But it should look a whole lot more like that. Maybe a little bit darker. So before I get too carried away and pull all these bolts and pull this oil pan and all that jazz, I'm just going to double check and verify that the flywheel flex plate whirligig spinny thing didn't come loose again. To do that, I have to pull these bolts. They're 18 millimeter. I think there's 3 or 4. I'll know when I pull them out. So I'll get my 18 millimeter wrench on that and get them loose. And in order to spin the engine over, up here on the harmonic balancer, it's a 15/16 works. I don't know, it seems a little bit loose, but it'll turn the engine. And I can hold on to the engine with that while I break those loose. Once I get that loose, I can wiggle that spinny whirly thingy doohickey, what's it, and make sure that that's not what's rattling, because it did fool me last time and made me think I had a rod knock, but it was actually that flex plate was broke. So I'm going to crack those loose and see what happens. So I've got a breaker bar wedged up against the frame, holding that in place, because these things are pretty tight, and it's a confined area, so I really don't have a lot of room to get some leverage on the wrench, you know. So to get more leverage, I always take another wrench. It's gonna fall off, I know, but put it under like that. Now you get all this extension, and it makes it a lot easier to turn. Once it's broke loose, then you can just take it off of there. I'll probably get an extension and a socket on it, but these are pretty short bolts. Ugh. I did put a bunch of Loctite on it too. I remember that. Loctite's your friend until you have to take something loose. Then it's not. So I pulled all these loose. There's 3 of them, 18 millimeter, and we seem to be good. You see that the teeth turning there, hand in there. If I get up in there, she's definitely tight, and the torque converter, it's unbolted from the torque converter, and the torque converter spins free. And that's just the torque converter rubbing against the whirligig. So she's good. So now it's on to taking this out. I'm not going to put those bolts back in until when the pan's off. Then I'll replace these bolts. It'll be a lot easier to get to, and I can properly torque them. So yeah, we'll pull this guy off, and we'll see what we're looking at. So when I pulled this engine out before, I came from the front with the cherry picker. The side is definitely not ideal. I'm doing this because I remember when I pulled the engine out, the legs from the cherry picker being down underneath the car were here, and I was doing a worm crawling to get up and over those things, and it was a little rough. I'm not pulling this engine, I just have to lift on this side so that I can get this motor mount out, because it is in the way of a couple of bolts and the oil pan. To pull that motor mount, I have to take the weight of the engine up off of it. I can get it out of the way, and then I should be able to get the pan out. Hopefully. And also, I'm going from the side, and I've got the legs back as far as I can, because once I put the pressure on and lift that engine up, these guys are going to stay here for a while. This is just going to support the engine. It's not going to pull it out. That one I left long. This one I ran short so that I can crawl underneath here a little bit without that getting in the way. Also, I extended the boom as far as I could. Again, not ideal, but I'm not pulling the engine. I'm not going to be swinging it around in the garage or anything like that, so all I'm doing is lifting her up. So to get this motor mount loose, I've got two 15mm bolts, one here and one here. And there's a couple on top going into the motor mounts sitting in this frame. I'm not sure. I'm probably doing this backwards. These are easier to get to, and I can use the impact on them. So I'm going to try this first. If they don't work, they don't work, you know. There's one. There's two. So yeah, that's a whole lot easier. I just don't know if the motor mount's going to be able to pull away from the engine block when I pull these. I've got to lift it up enough to get these bolts to pass through up here. You know what I mean? So the bolts have to come up high enough, and then I can unbolt. I'm going to unbolt first from the engine. So to unbolt it from the engine, I got one here, and this one over here is gonna really be, it might not be too bad. I'm gonna have to get past this. This is the tail shaft of, for all intents and purposes, of the transmission axle, that, you know. So those two, and then I've already got these two out, there and there, and then it should be giving me enough room to get to these bolts in here. And there's a few more along there, and then I can pull this pan out. So I had to run up to Tractor Supply and get a couple of wrenches, and there's like an inch of snow, maybe an inch and a half. Roads are a little bit slick. I'm used to driving that Durango in this kind of weather. This Saturn, I love this Saturn, but man, when it doesn't like the snow. This thing does not like the snow. I can't get going straight. I can't turn. I can't get started. I can't stop. This thing's like, hey, take me home. So I just got back from Tractor Supply because we don't have a Harbor Freight, at least within an hour of my house. And look at that. I am a bargain bin shopper. Crescent. Nice knife. I need a new knife. My old one's all full of concrete and laying on the side of the road somewhere. Crescent tools are kind of weird though. I had a box full of tools. They were Crescent tools, and the only thing that wasn't in there was a Crescent wrench. That's weird. I'll open this thing up and wear it with pride. Now if I can just find a knife to open it. Also picked up a bunch of these hex bit socket set. Look at that. There's all, like, who, I don't know, that one's big. But anyhow, that's not a bad price. I know they're job smart. But they're, you know, you don't put that much torque on something like that. Now I can throw this thing out. This is the whole reason that I went down there in the first place. I needed this wrench. You know? I did get a whole set of gear wrenches a couple years ago. They were on sale. They're not bad. I don't mind them. This one's got the angle head on it, and I kind of need that because I got to get into this thing, which I got those two bolts out. But I got to take that oil filter off, and then there's more. You can see there's one there. That's behind the AC pump. And they say that I don't know if that one's going to come out without hitting the pump. If it does, that'd be great, because I have to get that bracket off of there. So I went and that bracket there, that has to come off. And it's bolted up there. You can see it. I don't have my pointer handy, so I'm not going to show you. But it's there. Anyhow, I had to get a wrench so that I can get to the ones in the back. And, well, you know, I went to buy just one wrench, and they don't sell just one wrench like Harbor Freight does. So I had to buy the whole kit and caboodle. You don't even want to know how much that cost, but at least now I've got it for the time being. It won't be long, I'll lose all of them. So the bolts I need to get to get this guy out, this one is not one of them. This one back here is. And then there's one up above it, hidden back there. I think I'm touching it right now. And I probably got a little overzealous with the Torquey when I put it back together originally, because I can't make them come loose. Even though, I don't know if you can see that other one. It's way up. There it is. See it? No. Yep. No. Anyhow, I got to get those out. And they're like really, really tight. So I'm going to have to make this up as I go along. I can get this one. I can't get this on that one, but I can get it up on the top one. And that will give me a lot more leverage. I'm worried about stripping them off and making them round. But I can get a hold of that, but I just gotta, you know, because I got the engine floating in the air so I can get to this. And then when I put some pressure on it, the whole engine kind of moves, lifts up and down. But leverage and desperation are your friends. Trying to get the socket and the ratchet on. It's just, it won't, the bolt's here, and I can't get it because I'm hitting the transaxle. And it just, I can't get this on. I would love to use this so I don't round everything off. So I'm getting desperate. Sometimes you have to come up with ideas. And this is what happens when I don't have any supervision. Well, it's shorter, but it's not flat. I'm going to give that about 2 hours to cool down. Just kidding, I'm going to go quench it in the snow. So you can probably kind of see how I did this. I couldn't get any leverage on it. I couldn't get any torque to pull them suckers loose. So I got the bottom one loose and done and out. And this one, I got a ratchet on. And I got this bar and wedged it against the frame and pushed down and got it loose. And now I can kind of work it out. I don't want to go too far, so I back myself in a corner with this ratchet. And now I can put a wrench on it and wrench it out the rest of the way. They're going to be fun putting back. And then I still got 2 up on the front to do up here somewhere. They're fun. So it's coming to this. I've got to get, if I can get in there, that bolt out. There's not a lot of room in between that bolt and that air conditioner compressor. Someone online says it can happen. There's only that much room. I'm afraid I'm going to back it out into the compressor, and then I'm going to still have to take the compressor off. Alright, so if you're ever removing an AC compressor from an 04 Monte Carlo 3800, there is one 15mm bolt here. that goes right behind that wire. I don't know if I can get up in there and show you, but anyhow, it's there. And then there's right where this stud is, there's a 15 millimeter nut that goes over here. And then on the very back, you can see, and maybe I can get back there. Here you go. There's an 18 millimeter bolt that you have to loosen, and then it slides out of here. 18 millimeter bolt here, slides. 15 millimeter bolt here. 15 millimeter nut here. I really couldn't find anything on YouTube, so I figured I'd put one out there just in case. 04 Monte Carlo 3800 AC compressor. 3 bolts, 2 15 millimeters in the front, 18 millimeter in the back. So I'm trying to get you into a spot where you can see something. There's not a lot of room here. I was gonna try and do all of this in one shot and one video. You probably don't realize I've been out here for 3 days on and off. I got all the oil pan bolts out except for a couple that's still holding it up. So I figured I'd bring you down for the reveal. Hopefully this thing don't fall on my head, because it doesn't seem like there's much holding it. And, oh, that one's still tight. There's about 87 bolts holding this thing on, and it still leaks. So they needed about another 87. There we go. Yeah, it's coming loose. It's just it's leaked so bad, it's had so much oil running through it that it's not even, usually you gotta smack them and pry them off. Not this one. It wants to fall down. It's been quite an adventure. I figured I would end this video. Oh, there we go. Nice to catch that right in the forehead. Where did that go? At least I'm wearing my safety readers. Okay, and then for one final dig, they did me right by putting one more bolt right directly behind. I mean, it might as well be rubbing against the crank pulley. So you could almost couldn't get a wrench at it. All right, I got that one. Now it's wanting to fall down, so let's bring her down. Maybe. I might have to take this silly thing out of here too. She's hanging up. She is hanging up. I don't know on what. I can't look up in there and see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. That's out. Dripping oil and stuff. That's good. Okay. So, yeah, it was hanging up. I don't know if you can see it, but there's the oil. Oh, yeah. Dump that out on the ground. That's good. There's the oil sensor, oil level sensor. Was hooked over the pickup tube. So, all right, I'm just gonna. So now that pan's off, we can see up in here a little bit better what's going on. This is your dipstick tube, and this is your pickup and your screen. And it's got some scotch in it. That's not good. And this I have to pull off, and then we're going to be able to see the business and what's going on. I think I'll leave that pickup tube connected if I can. The least I have to take off, the least I have to put back together. You know? So let me see if I can. This probably got to pry off. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe. There it goes. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. It's just a little stuck. The starter's holding it up. I can get it past that maybe if I break it. Okay. So this will be real easy to replace. Okay. So that part's out. That thing that sits in there. All right. And here's what we've been looking for. Which one of these bad boys is bad. Main bearing, rod bearing, rod bearing, crank bearing, rod bearing, rod bearing, crank bearing, rod bearing, rod bearing. The noise was coming out of here. There's the timing chain there. I'm going to go ahead and relieve some pressure on them and just kind of turn them around and take a look at it and see what's up, because they all feel a little loose. Side to side play, which is good. They're supposed to. This one, that might be our baby right there. It's pretty bouncy. So yeah, we'll roll this over and just get a look and see what's going on in here. So it's probably going to be difficult for you to see. I'm going to do my best. This is the pickup tube. It's got some metal shavings in it. That is a horrible, horrible sign. It's not just metal shavings. It's metal slivers. There's a couple of them, little ones. I'm assuming part of the bearing that is decided to leave us. I'm going to go ahead and I've got the wrench up on the crank pulley, and I'm going to crank this thing over a little bit just to get a good look at what's rattling, what's coming loose, what's good, what's bad, what's ugly, and we'll decide what we're going to do with it then. So here we go. Oh, I hear some rubbing already. I don't like that. Oh, that's the torque converter. Roll. Let me slide that back a little bit. Okay, so that won't make that noise anymore, in my opinion. I'm going to rock it back and forth with this. It should be no up and down play. A little bit of side to side is all right. That guy right there. That is our baby. I can feel it already. You probably can't see it move, but it moves up and down. This one's tight. Let's go ahead and go a little more. Got a little compression we're pushing on. I'm going to go ahead and go up here to the fronts because they're coming around first. So let's see what we got here. Yeah, that one's good and tight. Ooh, that one has got way too much slop in it. You hear that? That's not good at all. So I can move that. That is, I don't know if you can see. I don't even know. Yeah, are you on it? Watch that. I'll pull it back down. Watch how much this moves. That's a horrible thing. This one, side to side's okay. Up and down, nothing. We're gonna go ahead and pull this and see how bad that bearing is, because that is definitely bad. And since it's right here where I need it, I'm gonna rock it back the other way real quick just to get her, maybe get her in a spot that I can get to them bolts. And we'll see what we got. Nancy Wilson, that's tight. All right. I was going to try and do all this in one video, but it's getting long already, and I've got hours of editing to do. And I still have to decide if I'm even going to bother trying to fix this thing after all said and done. Okay. So there we go. You can see the bearing isn't here anymore. It's gone. It left us. If you can see up in here, there is this little fuzzy piece right there. Well, that's not supposed to be like that. That's a spun bearing. It's up in there, and it's half of it's supposed to be down here and the other half is supposed to be up high, and it's not gouged that bad. It does have some gouging on the crank. Alright, I'm gonna, hopefully it's not on a compression stroke on the cylinder. I can push that piston up a little bit, and I'll crank this thing around and see if I can get that bearing out and see how that crank looks at that point. I can push, oh yeah, okay, so I can push that piston up, get it up out of the way. And now, let's bring that, can you see what I'm doing? I'm bringing the bearing around, and there we go. There's some of it. Here's what's left of this one. You see what we got going on here? I caught it early. I definitely caught it early because that explains the metal shavings that were in here. So what happened was it got wore out, and this one decided to go up there. And that's why there was nothing at the bottom for that. And that's why that was making that rattle. I'm going to have to check all of them at this point, and I'm probably going to have to change all of them. I'm going to have to get a whole lot of stuff. I got to order things. I got to buy things, have it shipped here. I don't know. I'll go ahead and crank these other ones loose. I got to remember which ones are which, though. This is very important that you don't mix these up. That they go the right way and they stay in the right spot. And that is scuffed up a little bit, a little more than I like. I can take care of it with some emery cloth and a shoelace, believe it or not. But there's your rattle. If I do this, I'm going to end up doing every one. And the right way to do that is one at a time. So that one's getting ready to be bad. That one's good. That one is not. Let's see how this one looks. If I can get it. If I can get it broke loose. If I can't get it broke loose, I'm gonna go in and take a nap. Yeah. A lot of times you can tell too when you look at the cap, it'll be, this one hasn't been doing it long enough and done enough damage to itself, but you can see a bluing or from it getting hot from beating itself to death. You'll see a discolor in the metal on the cap. There we go. So yeah, okay, so that bearing's still in there. I do see some grit and some scarring. Huh. I gotta remember to not do that wrong. So you can see, like I was saying, see that discoloration on the bearing. So this one was taking a beating too. It didn't spin, so it didn't damage the crank. That's good news. But it definitely was ready. It was on its way out. All right, well, thanks for sticking around. I'm going to have some decisions and I got some looking to do and see what I'm going to come up with on gaskets and bolts and bearings and which sizes I'm gonna get. And we're gonna see if we can fix this thing, or if I'm gonna send it to a charity or sell it for parts. Till next time, God bless you all. We'll see you.